Senator Cash.
Thank you very much, Mr Acting Deputy President. And the debate that we are having today in this chamber has its foundation in two unequivocal promises made by the now Prime Minister of Australia to the Australian people. On the 16th of August 2010, just 5 days before the federal election, Ms Gillard made the following promise, and a very solemn promise it was, to the Australian people. She said, "There will be no carbon tax under a government I lead." This promise was clear, it was unequivocal, it was unambiguous. And more than that, it was intended to influence the voting intentions of the Australian people and designed to encourage them to believe that if they voted for the Australian Labor Party, they would be voting for a party whose platform would be that there would be no carbon tax in the event that they were elected. But it didn't stop there. Ms Gillard followed up this unequivocal promise again, just 1 day before the 2010 federal election. Ms Gillard confirmed to the media and she confirmed to the Australian voters that her promise that there will be no carbon tax under a government I lead was clearly the Australian Labor Party's policy position going into the 2010 federal election. Nothing could be more clearer in the minds of the Australian people who were about to cast their votes and determine who would be leading Australia the following day. The Australian Labor Party, who said there will be no carbon tax under a government I lead.
Order. The time being 6:30. The sitting of the Senate is suspended until 7:30 p.m.
Thank you. Senator Cash.
Thank you, Madam Acting Deputy President. And, Madam Acting Deputy President, just like Prime Minister Gillard, the Treasurer of Australia, Mr Swan, he also sought to influence the voters of Australia prior to the 2010 election by again telling them that the Labor Party's platform prior to the 2010 election was that there would be no carbon tax in the event that they were elected. And what did Mr Swan say just days before the 2010 federal election? He said this, very explicit: "We have made our position very clear. We have ruled it out. We have ruled out a carbon tax." So, Madam Acting Deputy President, despite the explicit promises, not made once, not made twice, but made on several occasions by the Prime Minister of Australia, Julia Gillard, by the Treasurer of Australia, Wayne Swan, and of course by every Labor member and senator across Australia who went to the 2010 election on the explicit platform that if elected, they would not impose a carbon tax on the Australian people. It is a great shame. It is a great shame that the Senate stands here today debating the carbon tax legislation, debating the legislation that the Labor Party of Australia said to the Australian people they would never introduce. This is a complete, total and utter betrayal of the Australian people. This is a government that, when it comes to the issue of trust, and in particular in relation to the carbon tax, is devoid of any moral compass. But as Australians are now learning in so many policy areas, there is a litany of broken promises, and they expect nothing less from the Gillard Labor government. And why? Well, the answer is very simple. Because the Gillard Labor government will always take the cheap, they will take the easy, and they will take the political option instead of taking decisions that are in the national interest, but on top of that are consistent with the promises that they made to the people of Australia in the lead-up to the 2010 federal election. Without a doubt, Madam Acting Deputy President, the next election will be a referendum on the carbon tax. And why? Because every Labor member and senator went to the last election on the basis of what we now know is a blatant lie. They have betrayed the Australian people. And this betrayal occurred despite the Australian Labor Party unequivocally saying to the Australian people that if elected, we would not be standing here today in this place debating this legislation. So what do we have? We have Labor MPs and Labor senators who went to an election on the promise of no carbon tax, who have now voted in the other place and will possibly vote in this place to impose on the Australian people the most toxic tax that the mums and dads of Australia have ever seen. But on top of that, the price of the Australian Labor Party's betrayal is going to be felt by every mum and dad in Australia every time they pay their electricity bill, every time they go to the shop. Everything they touch is going to have a price increase because of Labor's toxic tax. And if you look at the modelling and if you look at the estimates, it is estimated that a carbon tax will add at least $300 a year to a family's power bill. This is families in Australia that are already struggling under the rising costs of living. So every time a mum or dad in Australia turns on the lights, they will be paying for the Australian Labor Party's carbon tax. And despite these facts, when the now Prime Minister was actually challenged about her betrayal of the Australian Labor Party people, do you know what she said, or the Australian people? She said this. On Q&A on Monday the 14th of March, Prime Minister Gillard admitted that she walked away from her commitment to Australians that there will be no carbon tax under a government I lead. Her explanation was merely, I did not intend to mislead the voters. What a weak, pathetic and contrived response. How the Prime Minister can stand before the Australian people and argue that she did not intend to mislead them when by her very actions, her calculated actions, that is exactly what she set out to do. But not only did the Prime Minister of Australia mislead the voters, the Prime Minister has now deceived them as well by introducing the carbon tax legislation. If the Australian Labor Party, led by Ms Julia Gillard, had any moral compass at all, they would have supported the Leader of the Opposition's motion to take this legislation to a plebiscite and give Australians a say. Let the Australian people have a say on whether or not they want to see a carbon tax introduced. But will the Australian people do that? And Senator Nash is correct to ask the question, why not? And Senator Nash, we all know the answer. We all know the answer. Because if the Prime Minister of Australia, if the Australian Labor Party actually took this legislation to the people and said, do you want a carbon tax, the Australian people would vote resoundingly no. And the Australian Labor Party know that. They have fooled Australians once, and the Australian people have made it very, very clear they will not be fooled again by the members and senators of the Australian Labor Party. They know that the imposition of a carbon tax in Australia is nothing more and nothing less than one of political choice. Because the Labor Party have got into an unholy alliance with the Greens, it is not one of environmental necessity. Mr Acting Deputy President, when Australians are promised something as fundamental as there will be no carbon tax under a government I lead, but hours before they go to cast their vote in relation to who will ultimately lead them, and they vote on the basis of a promise made by the Australian Labor Party that there will be no carbon tax under a government that they led, and when the Australian Labor Party, led by Ms Gillard, is unable to go through with that promise, there is only one thing that the government can do, and that is exactly what Mr Howard did in relation to the GST. You take the major policy change to an election. You were elected on the basis of a mandate, and that mandate was that you would not introduce a carbon tax. You do not have a mandate to now stand here in this place today and debate this legislation. Do what Mr Howard did and take it to the Australian people. If you are so sure that this is the right thing for Australians, then take it to an election. Take it to an election and show us on this side of the chamber that we are wrong. But you won't. You won't. Because each one of you, and in particular those in marginal seats downstairs, know that as each day goes by, as each day creeps towards the next federal election, it is one day less that they are going to be in this place, because they betrayed their constituents. They betrayed the people of Australia. And if there is one thing that Australians don't like to be called stupid. And that is exactly what the Labor Party has said to the people of Australia. The Coalition, on the other hand, has made it very, very clear what its position is in relation to the carbon tax. We will continue until the final vote is taken in this place to oppose this toxic tax whilst in opposition. And if we are not successful in opposing it, if and when we are elected, the very first order of business for a coalition government will be to rescind this toxic legislation. We have also made it very, very clear to the people of Australia, if we are elected, we will have a mandate. We will have a mandate to repeal this toxic legislation. And if the Australian Labor Party don't want to listen to that mandate, we will have the guts. We will have the guts to go to a double dissolution. That is how sure the Coalition is of its position in relation to the carbon tax. Why? Because Labor's toxic tax means this for Australians. It means, just like so many taxes that the Labor Party has introduced, this is just another one, a $9 billion hit a year in relation to the tax. It means for the mums and dads of Australia a 10% hike in the cost of their electricity bills. It means for the mums and dads of Australia a 9% hike in the cost of their gas bills. And this is only in the first year alone, because after the first year, all of those prices just keep going up. It means a higher marginal tax rate for many low and middle income earners. And what it also means for the Australian budget bottom line is a $4.3 billion hit. Translate that into the cost per year for mums and dads, and you are looking at potentially in excess of $515 per year, and that's just for starters. And these are the mums and dads of Australia who don't have a lot. They go to work, they work hard to pay their taxes because they're proud, they work hard to put their children through school because they believe in giving them a good education. Occasionally, they might have a little bit of discretionary income left over at the end of the week, which they might be able to take their kids out to dinner with. But once this toxic carbon tax goes through, all over. There will be no discretionary income left for the mums and dads of Australia, because any income that they may have had left over at the end of the week, it will be going to pay for Labor's toxic carbon tax. But not only that, Mr Acting Deputy President, the carbon tax is a $1 trillion cost to the Australian economy over the coming decades. But you see, when you say trillion under the current government, it really doesn't mean a lot. It was millions, then it was billions, and now when we talk in terms of the Australian Labor Party's economic incompetence, we are now talking in the trillions of dollars. Who would ever have thought that we would actually be able to stand in this place and in terms of hits to the economy, we would actually be talking hits in the terms of trillions. Trillions of dollars solely put down to the economic mismanagement by the Australian Labor Party. But what is worse, Mr Acting Deputy President, is this. Not only will the mums and dads of Australia be paying more under this toxic carbon tax, the only people that are going to be getting rich are foreign traders, are foreign carbon traders. Now, how's that for hypocrisy? The Labor Party, in order to convince themselves that this policy actually does mean nothing, it's not all economic pain for no environmental gain, what will the Australian Labor Party do? They will be spending in excess of $3.5 billion each year on purchasing foreign carbon credits. Good grief. And then by 2050, it will rise to $57 billion. And in economic terms, that is the equivalent of 1.5% of GDP. Not that those type of figures mean anything to anybody on the other side. So whilst the mums and dads of Australia are losing their jobs, they're losing the ability to pay their bills, they're losing the ability to take their kids out of dinner, foreign carbon traders. Foreign carbon traders will be making billions of dollars under a toxic scheme put forward by the Australian Labor Party. I tell you, if that's not policy that's not in the national interest, I don't know what is. But, Mr Acting Deputy President, unlike those on this side of the chamber, when we do face the next election, Labor members and senators, but more so members in the other place, they are going to have to answer to their electorate. They are going to have to go to their constituents and actually say, we are deliberately inflicting this pain on you. We told you one thing before the 2010 election, you voted on the basis of a lie, and now that we are in government, we have taken the deliberate decision to inflict pain on you. We are deliberately introducing a policy which we know will increase your electricity bills, which we know will increase your gas bills, which we know will increase your cost of living, and which we also know will actually have no effect on emissions reductions at all. In fact, and again, this is not those of us on this side of the chamber saying this, the government's own modelling, that is the Australian Labor Party, the government's own modelling, which they have released, actually confirms that as of the 1st of July next year, when they introduce the carbon tax, which allegedly is going to solve all of the environmental problems in the world, the domestic emissions in Australia will actually increase. That's right, the Labor Party's own modelling shows, let's have a look, domestic emissions will in fact increase in the period 2012 to 2020 from 578 million tonnes to, lo and behold, 621 million tonnes. So not only were the people of Australia told by the Australian Labor Party the day before the 2000 election that if they were elected they would not impose this tax, they are now having a tax imposed on them for allegedly environmental gain, but on the government's own modelling. The government's own modelling, domestic emissions in Australia will actually rise. But do you know how we offset that? It's a very devious form of policy making. If the government purchases in the billions of dollars those carbon credits from foreign traders, somehow that assuages all of our guilt and suddenly we're doing the right thing. So mums and dads of Australia, guess what? You pay whilst the foreign carbon traders will earn billions of dollars off the Australian Labor Party. Mr Acting Deputy President, hypocrisy, duplicity, disloyalty and betrayal. These are the words that the people of Australia are now using to describe the Australian Labor Party. And given the Labor government's betrayal of the people of Australia, it is patently true that Labor's continual claims that it alone is the party that looks after the workers is just more Labor rhetoric. Labor members know that the new Labor has turned its back on Australians, it has turned its back on traditional Labor values, and they are waiting to punish new Labor at the next election.
Senator, your time has expired.